Today we will tell you the story of the Byzantine Empire. It is normal to ask yourself what kind of empire this is, or to feel slightly confused. Even when someone hears about the Byzantine Empire, it may seem as if we are talking about something completely different from the Roman Empire. But in fact, the Byzantine Empire is nothing more than the eastern part of the Roman Empire, which managed to survive for almost 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. Do not worry. Now I will explain everything. It all begins at the end of the 3rd century, when the Roman Empire is on the brink of collapse. In the year 285, Emperor Diocletian decides to divide the administration of the empire into two halves, Western and Eastern, in order to govern it more effectively under conditions of constant internal and external threats. The well-known system called the Tetrarchy is introduced, under which each half of the empire has its own Augustus, the senior emperor, and its own Caesar, who is his assistant and heir. In theory, this was supposed to allow for more efficient governance. In practice, however, disputes soon arise between the different emperors. From this chaos emerges a key figure, Constantine, an ambitious general who manages to prevail over his rivals and reunite the empire under his authority. He is an extremely important personality not only because of his military victories, but also because of the legalization of Christianity and the beginning of a new era for Rome. A little later, in the year 330, Constantine founds a new capital, built on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, and gives it his name, Constantinople. The city is strategically located between Europe and Asia and becomes a key point for trade and defense. It is from here that the Byzantine Empire will later develop. Over time, the division we spoke about becomes firmly established. In the year 395, after the death of Emperor Theodosius I, the Roman Empire is officially divided into two. The Western Roman Empire, with its capital initially in Milan and later in Ravenna, and the Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Constantinople. From this moment on, the two parts follow completely different paths. The Western Roman Empire does not last long and collapses in the year 476, when its last emperor is deposed by the Germanic tribes. The Eastern Roman Empire, however, survives. It is precisely this empire that we today know as the Byzantine Empire. Interestingly, its inhabitants never called themselves Byzantines. They considered themselves Romans, Romaoi, the legitimate heirs of ancient Rome. The term Byzantine was introduced by historians centuries later in order to distinguish this more Hellenized, Christian, and Orientalized version from the old Rome of togas and senators. At its height, the Byzantine Empire encompassed the richest and most urbanized territories of the old Roman Empire. This included the Balkans, Greece, Asia Minor, present-day Turkey, the Levant, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and parts of North Africa. The heart of the empire was always Constantinople, a vast, fortified, and cosmopolitan city that would become one of the greatest capitals of the medieval world. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire reaches its golden age, especially during the reign of one of its most powerful emperors, Justinian I, who ruled from the year 527 to 565. Justinian had one clear dream: to restore the glory of the old Roman Empire, to reclaim the lost Western territories, and to unite them under one faith, one law, and one emperor. Under his command, the Byzantine armies managed to reconquer parts of North Africa, Italy, and southern Spain. For a short time, it seemed that the Roman Empire was once again united, but holding these territories proved to be extremely difficult. The wars were expensive, resources limited, and enemies too numerous. Nevertheless, the era of Justinian remains exceptionally significant. In addition to his military campaigns, the emperor undertakes a massive legal reform, culminating in the creation of the Corpus Juris Civilis, a compilation of Roman law that would have an enormous influence on Europe centuries later. This is also a time of great cultural and architectural flourishing, symbolized by the construction of the magnificent Basilica of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. But like any empire, the Byzantine Empire is not spared from crises. In the 7th and 8th centuries, the rise of Islam radically changes the map of the Mediterranean. In an extremely short period of time, the Arabs conquer Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and North Africa, depriving the empire of some of its richest and most strategically important regions. This is a devastating blow. Byzantium loses a large part of its territory and is forced to transform in order to survive. During this period, the empire becomes increasingly Greek and increasingly Christian. The Latin language gradually disappears as an official language and is replaced by Greek. And although its inhabitants continue to consider themselves Romans, Byzantine identity increasingly distances itself from the Latin and Western heritage and shapes a unique culture influenced by the Hellenistic tradition and the Orthodox faith. In the 9th and most of the 10th century, the empire manages to stabilize and experiences a kind of renaissance. The administration is reorganized, internal authority is strengthened, and many external enemies are brought under control. Constantinople once again shines as a cultural, economic, and religious center in an unstable world. From here, Orthodox Christianity spreads, and the city becomes a center of pilgrimage, education, and diplomacy. Here it is important to understand one of the key characteristics of the Byzantine world, Orthodox Christianity. For centuries, the Christian Church is formally united under the leadership of the Pope in Rome, but in practice the differences between Western and Eastern Christianity become increasingly evident. This is not only about different languages and customs, but about different ways of organizing the Church and deep theological disagreements. In the West, the Pope is regarded as the supreme spiritual authority. In the East, no such figure exists. The Church is led by several patriarchs, with the one in Constantinople being the most influential. The emperor also plays a key role in religious life. The Church is more closely connected to political power and more decentralized. One of the most famous theological disputes is the so-called Filioque, an addition to the Nicene Creed according to which the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. Eastern Christians maintain the position that the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father. At first glance, this may seem insignificant, but in reality it reflects deep differences in the understanding of God, the Trinity, and ecclesiastical authority. All these tensions reach their culmination in the year 1054, when the so-called East-West Schism occurs. The Pope in Rome and the Patriarch of Constantinople mutually excommunicate each other, thus definitively sealing the rupture between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. From this moment on, Orthodox Christianity develops independently, with its own hierarchy, rituals, traditions, and theology. This schism has not only religious, but also political and cultural consequences and deepens the alienation between East and West. After the schism, the Byzantine Empire continues to face increasingly serious challenges. Paradoxically, some of its greatest problems come in the form of help. At the end of the 11th century, Emperor Alexios Komnenos seeks assistance from the West against a new threat, the Seljuk Turks, who conquer much of Asia Minor. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II issues a call that changes history, the First Crusade. Thousands of knights and soldiers from Europe set out for the Holy Lands, and many of them pass through Constantinople, promising cooperation with Byzantium. At first, this alliance functions relatively well, and the empire manages to temporarily stabilize its eastern borders. But relations between the Crusaders and the Byzantines are never entirely good. The lack of trust, differing goals, and cultural differences gradually increase the tension. All of this reaches its peak during the Fourth Crusade. Instead of continuing to the Holy Lands, the Crusaders attack Constantinople itself. The city is captured and plundered for days. This is a devastating blow. The Byzantine Empire ceases to exist for more than half a century and is replaced by the so-called Latin Empire, created after the sack of Constantinople in the year 1204. The Byzantines, however, do not disappear. They regroup in several successor states and manage to preserve imperial culture until, in the year 1261, they reclaim Constantinople. But the empire is now only a pale shadow of its former power. The territory is greatly reduced, the treasury is empty, and the city, though still magnificent, is deeply wounded. Meanwhile, in the east, a new power rises, the Ottoman Empire. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the Ottomans gradually press Byzantium, conquering city after city. The Byzantine emperors control fewer and fewer lands and survive thanks to complex diplomacy and the hope for Western aid, which never arrives. And so we arrive at the year 1453. The young Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II gathers a massive army and besieges Constantinople. The city has only a few thousand defenders, while the Ottomans numbered tens of thousands of soldiers, supported by powerful cannons capable of breaching the legendary walls. After nearly 2 months of siege, despite the heroic defense led by the last emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, the city falls. The emperor dies in battle, and with him the Byzantine Empire finally disappears. Mehmed II turns Constantinople into the new capital of his empire, Istanbul. A new era begins, but the legacy of Byzantium does not vanish. It continues to live on for centuries in art, law, religion, and culture. In the Orthodox world, especially in Russia, Byzantium remains a symbol and spiritual reference point, while in the West, Byzantine thought exerts a deep influence through its manuscripts, philosophy, and art. This was the story of the Byzantine Empire. What do you think? Could it have survived if Europe had helped Constantinople more? I am waiting for you in the comments. Until next time.